Welcome back, everyone, to Bella Dark Tales. Before we dive into tonight's story, I want to give a very special shout out to a listener who reached out to us and shared this account. Her name is Madison Calloway, and she writes to us all the way from Asheville, North Carolina. Madison, thank you so much for trusting us with this story. She said, and I quote, "I have never told anyone the full version of what happened to us that weekend. Not the police. Not my therapist. Not even my husband. But I need someone to know. I need it out of me." Those words right there, that is why we do what we do here at Bella Dark Tales. So Madison, we hear you. And everyone listening tonight, I want you to get comfortable, maybe turn the lights down just a little. Because what you are about to hear is something that is going to stay with you. This is a real account, shared with us in Madison's own words, reconstructed here for narration. Nothing has been exaggerated. If anything, she told us, the truth is worse than anything she could have invented. So let us begin. It started, the way most terrible things start, with a good idea. It was the third weekend of October. Madison was 26 years old at the time, living in Asheville with her boyfriend of 2 years, a man named Derek Holt. They had been planning this trip for weeks. A hiking weekend up in the Pisgah National Forest. Nothing crazy, nothing too ambitious. Just the two of them, a rented campsite, some trail mix, and a cooler full of beers. They had done trips like this before. They loved the outdoors. Derek especially. He was one of those people who had grown up with a father who dragged the family out camping every summer, so he had that easy confidence around nature. He knew how to read a trail. He knew how to set up a tent in the dark. He was the kind of person you wanted with you if something went wrong. But they did not go alone. At the last minute, 2 other couples joined them. There was Ryan and Chelsea, who were Derek's co-workers from the outdoor equipment company where he worked. And then there was a newer addition to the group, a couple none of them had known very long. His name was Garrett. Her name was Priya. They had been together about 4 months and had come into the group through Chelsea, who had met Priya at a pottery class downtown. Madison told us she had liked Priya immediately. She was funny, sharp, the kind of woman who could make a stranger laugh within 30 seconds of meeting her. Garrett she was less sure about. He was quiet in a way that felt deliberate. Not shy. Deliberate. Like he was always listening a little more carefully than the situation required. 6 people. 3 tents. 2 cars. 1 weekend. They drove up on Friday afternoon, arriving at the trailhead parking lot just as the sun was starting to dip. The plan was to hike in about 3 miles to the campsite they had reserved, set up before dark, cook over the fire, and spend the next 2 days doing day hikes and generally decompressing from the kind of lives that made you need a weekend in the forest every few months just to feel human again. The first part went exactly as planned. The hike-in was beautiful. Mid-October in western North Carolina is one of the most stunning things you can experience in this country. The trees were full orange and red and gold, the air had that crisp clean edge that makes you breathe deeper than usual, and the trail was well marked and easy. They reached the campsite, set up the tents, got a fire going, and by 8 o'clock they were sitting around the flames with beers in hand, telling stories and laughing loud into the dark woods around them. Madison said that was the last truly good moment she remembers from that trip. It was Garrett who brought it up. Around 9, maybe 9:30, when the fire was burning lower and the conversation had quieted to the comfortable kind of silence that sits between people who are warm and relaxed. He said, just casually, the way you might mention the weather, that he had been studying the trail maps for the area and had noticed something interesting. There was a service road about a mile north of that campsite. Old one. Not on the main park maps, but visible on some of the older USGS topographic maps he had downloaded. He said he had traced it, and it seemed to lead to some kind of structure. A building of some kind, deep in the trees, well off any marked trail. Ryan immediately said he wanted to check it out. That was Ryan. He was the kind of person who would have been the first one to run toward the noise in any horror movie, and everyone in the group knew it, and they all loved him for it even as it made them roll their eyes. Chelsea said absolutely not. It was dark. They were not traipsing through the forest at night to look at some old building. Derek said they could check it out in the morning if Garrett thought he could find it on foot. Garrett said he was pretty sure he could. Priya said nothing. Madison noticed that. She said Priya just sat there looking at the fire, both hands wrapped around her beer can, and she had gone very quiet the moment Garrett brought it up. At the time, Madison thought maybe Priya was just tired. Later she would think about that moment a great deal. They went to sleep around 11. The forest was very dark and very quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet that city people romanticize when they talk about getting back to nature. The thick kind. The pressing kind. The kind that makes you aware that you are very small and the woods around you are very old and very indifferent to your presence. Madison woke up at some point in the night. She did not know what had woken her. Derek was asleep beside her, his breathing slow and even. She lay still for a moment, listening. The forest was silent. Not even wind. Not even the sound of insects, which in itself was strange for October in that region. And then she heard it. Very faint. Very far away. A sound that she initially interpreted as an animal. A kind of low, rhythmic sound. Not quite a moan. Not quite a hum. Something in between. It went on for maybe 30 seconds and then stopped. She told herself it was a deer. She told herself lots of things. She went back to sleep. In the morning, over instant coffee and granola bars, Garrett announced that he wanted to go look for the structure he had found on the old map. Ryan was still enthusiastic. Derek said sure, why not, sounded like an adventure. Madison said she would go. Chelsea said she would stay at camp and read. She had brought a book, and she intended to use it. Priya hesitated, and then said she would go too. So 5 of them set off just after 9 in the morning. The day was clear and cold and beautiful. October's sunlight through the canopy above them. It should have been a perfect morning walk. Garrett led. He had his phone out with the downloaded map and he moved through the trees with the kind of confidence that Madison found slightly unsettling now that she thought about it later. Not the confidence of someone who had never been there before and was navigating by a downloaded map. More like the confidence of someone who knew roughly where they were going and was using the map as a prop. They moved off trail after about 10 minutes, pushing through underbrush, climbing over fallen logs. The terrain was not difficult, but it was dense. The trees here were older, the canopy thicker, and the light came through in scattered patches that moved slowly across the ground. About 40 minutes in, Ryan stopped and said he smelled something. Like wood smoke, he said. Old smoke. Like something that had been burned a long time ago, but the smell had never quite left. Then they saw it. It appeared between the trees gradually, the way things do in a forest, revealing itself in pieces. First the dark angle of a roofline. Then a section of wall. Then the full shape of it, sitting in a small clearing that the trees had grown around on all sides so that it felt less like a clearing and more like the forest had simply decided to leave this one spot alone. It was a cabin. Old. Very old. Single story, made of dark logs that had turned almost black with age and moisture. A covered porch ran along the front. 2 windows on either side of a central door, both dark. A stone chimney on the left side. The roof was partially collapsed at the rear, and vegetation had grown up over parts of the structure in a way that suggested it had been untouched for a very long time. But here is the thing that Madison said struck them all immediately, though none of them said it out loud at first. It was not falling apart. Not the way truly abandoned structures fall apart. The walls were sound. The porch boards were old but intact. The door was closed, not hanging open. The windows, dark as they were unbroken. It was weathered and overgrown, yes. But it was not collapsing. It was not rotting. It had the quality of something that had been maintained, just not recently. Or something that had simply refused to decay. Ryan walked straight toward it, which is exactly what you would expect Ryan to do. Derek and Madison followed more slowly. Priya hung back at the edge of the clearing. Garrett walked forward but stopped about 15 feet from the porch, and Madison noticed he did not go any closer than that. Ryan stepped up onto the porch. The boards creaked but held. He cupped his hands against one of the windows and peered inside. "Dark," he said. "Looks empty." He tried the door. It opened. Madison said she felt something at that moment that she has struggled to describe ever since. She said it was not quite fear. More like the feeling you get when you are walking down a street and something makes you stop and you look around and you cannot identify what it was that stopped you, but you know, somewhere below conscious thought, that something is wrong. That feeling. Like a frequency too low to hear but not too low to feel. Ryan went inside. He called out that it was amazing, they had to come see this. His voice sounded fine. Curious and excited. So Derek went in, and after a moment, Madison followed. The interior was a single large room. There was a stone fireplace on the left wall. A rough wooden table in the center with 4 chairs around it. A narrow bed along the back wall, a rail bed with a metal frame, not just a cot. Shelves on the right wall with objects on them, old objects, but arranged with a kind of deliberate care. A tin cup. A glass jar with something dark and dried inside it. A folded cloth. An oil lamp with the wick still intact. And on the table, at the center, a book. A thick, leather-bound book. Closed. Madison said the book was what bothered her the most. Not because it was dramatic or overtly sinister looking. Just because everything else in the cabin had the quality of things that had been left behind. The book looked like it had been placed. Deliberately. Recently. Like it was waiting. Derek picked it up and opened it. The first several pages were handwritten in a small, dense script. The ink was brown with age, but the writing was legible. It was a journal of some kind. The first entry was dated, and the date was unclear, but the style of the handwriting and the language suggested it was old. Very old. Perhaps late 19th century. Maybe earlier. Derek started reading out loud. The first few entries were mundane. A man describing the construction of the cabin, the difficulty of the terrain, the sourcing of timber. Then descriptions of the landscape, the way the forest looked in different seasons, the wildlife he observed. It sounded like the journal of a settler or a trapper or someone who had simply chosen to live alone out here for reasons of their own. And then the tone changed. Madison said Derek's voice changed when he got to the later entries. Quieter. More careful. He read one passage out loud and then stopped and did not continue. She asked him what it said. He closed the book and set it back on the table. She asked him again. He said it was just weird stuff. Old superstitions. Stuff people wrote when they spent too much time alone in the woods. She asked him to read it to her. He said no. Not exactly no in a frightened way. More like no in the way a person says no when they do not want to be the one responsible for something. She has thought about that a great deal since. They left the cabin. All of them. Ryan a little reluctantly, but he came. Priya was still at the edge of the clearing, and Madison noticed she had not moved from the same spot the entire time they had been inside. She looked pale, Madison said. And she was looking not at the cabin but at the tree line on the far side of the clearing. Madison asked her if she was okay. Priya said she was fine. She was not fine. Madison knew it even then, but she let it go. She let it go because it was a beautiful day and they were in a beautiful forest, and she wanted it to be fine because the alternative was that it was not fine, and she did not want to be the person who ruined the weekend by saying that out loud. They hiked back to camp. Chelsea had made more coffee and had barely looked up from her book when they came crashing back through the underbrush. She asked how it was. Ryan said incredible. There was this old cabin, totally abandoned, super creepy. Chelsea said cool without looking up. Ryan gave a detailed description of the interior. Chelsea said maybe they could check it out together later. Ryan said definitely. Lunch. More hiking on the marked trails in the afternoon. Dinner. The fire. And Garrett that evening said he wanted to go back to the cabin. At night. He said it in the same casual way he had said everything. Just a suggestion. Just an idea. He said it would be interesting to see it after dark. The way old structures looked in the dark, lit by flashlight or lantern, was completely different from the way they looked in daylight. He said he had a good flashlight. Ryan said yes immediately. Derek looked at Madison. Madison looked at Priya. Priya was staring into the fire. Chelsea said she would absolutely not be doing that, and she said it in a tone that made very clear she was not joking and there was no amount of enthusiasm or peer pressure that was going to change her mind. And Madison loved her for that. She genuinely did. Madison said she would go. She does not know, to this day, exactly why she said yes. She said it was partly that she did not want to leave Derek alone with Garrett's influence, if she is being honest. She did not entirely trust Garrett. And partly it was the stubborn part of her that refused to be the person who stayed behind. She had never been that person, and she did not want to start being that person at 26 years old in the middle of a forest. So it was 5 of them again. Chelsea at the camp with her headlamp and her book and her extremely sensible decision-making. They set off just after 9. The forest at night in October in western North Carolina is a different world. In the day it is golden and open and full of moving light. At night it closes down. The darkness under the canopy is absolute in places. Their flashlight beams cut across it, and illuminated narrow strips of trees and brush, and the ground immediately ahead, and beyond those strips was just black. Heavy, solid black. The kind of darkness that has weight to it. Garrett led again, moving confidently. Madison walked close to Derek. Ryan and Chelsea, no, Ryan and Priya, were just behind them. Priya had come without saying much. She had simply stood up when they were leaving and followed. Madison had thought about asking her why, but she did not. The walk took longer than it had in the morning. The terrain that had been navigable in daylight was trickier in the dark, more disorienting, the landmarks less visible. But Garrett moved without hesitation. 45 minutes, maybe 50, and then the trees thinned and the clearing was there and the cabin was there. It looked different at night. Madison said she had expected it to look spookier, the way old buildings look in horror movies, all dramatic shadows and menace. Instead it looked smaller, quieter, like something that had pulled itself inward in the dark. The windows were still unlit. The door was still closed. Everything was exactly as they had left it. Garrett went first. Up the porch steps. Pushed the door open. Went in. Ryan followed immediately. Then Derek, then Madison, then Priya. Inside, the cabin felt smaller at night. The flashlight beams threw everything into extreme contrast, deep shadow and sharp light. The table was exactly as they had left it. The shelves exactly as they had left them. But the book was not where Derek had put it. In the morning, Derek had set it back at the center of the table. Now it was at the far end of the table, pushed toward the edge near the fireplace wall, and it was open. Lying open. Madison said very quietly, she said, "Did anyone move the book?" Nobody had. Nobody had been back there since morning. She looked at Garrett, because if anyone had come back it would have been Garrett, and he was looking at the book with an expression she could not read in the flashlight light. Ryan walked over to the book. He leaned down and looked at the open pages. He started reading and then he straightened up and stepped back and said, in a voice that was trying to be normal and not quite making it, that this was some seriously weird stuff. Madison went to look. The book was open to a page in the middle. The handwriting here was different from the early entries. Larger. More erratic. Like the writer had been in a hurry or in distress or both. She read what was on the page in front of her. And here, Madison said to us, she is going to do her best to recount what she read. She said she has never written it down before, but she has read it so many times in her memory that she could probably recite it word for word. She said it went something like this. The voice in the trees is not an animal. I have been out here long enough to know all the animals and none of them make this sound. It comes at night, and always from the same direction, from the north, from the high ground where the boulders are. I have walked up there in daylight and found nothing. No tracks. No scat. No sign. But at night the sound comes, and when it comes the other animals go silent. All of them. Even the insects. Everything holds its breath. I had begun to think that the sound is not meant to frighten. It is meant to locate. It is the sound of something learning where I am. There are marks on the trees at the edge of the property. I did not make them. They were not there when I came. They appeared over 3 nights. They are cut into the bark, low, about knee height. Always in sets of 3. I have shown them to no one because there is no one to show. The nearest town is 2 days' walk. I have considered leaving, but I find I cannot. I do not mean I am reluctant. I mean something is preventing me. When I pack my things and I face the trail toward the south, something happens to me. A feeling. Like walking into a wall that is not there. A pressure. I turn back each time. Something comes to the porch at night. I hear the boards. I do not go to the door. I have put the bar across. It does not try the door. It only stands on the porch. I can hear it breathe. Madison stopped reading there. She stepped back from the table. She turned around and found that Priya was not in the room. She asked where Priya was. Ryan turned around. Derek turned around. Garrett, she noticed, did not seem surprised. They called her name. No answer from inside the cabin. They went out onto the porch. Their flashlight beams swept the clearing. Priya was standing at the far edge of the clearing, near the tree line on the north side. The far side. The side that the journal had mentioned. She was standing very still, facing the trees. Madison called her name again. Priya did not turn around. Derek went across the clearing toward her. Madison followed. Ryan was right behind them. When they got to her, she was standing with her hands at her sides and her face very close to the trees, not touching them but close, her chin slightly tilted up like she was listening to something above her. Derek touched her shoulder, and she startled so violently that she stumbled and he had to catch her. She looked around at all of them with an expression that Madison described as terrified and confused, like someone who had been woken from a very deep sleep in the wrong place and did not yet know how they had gotten there. She said she did not know how she had gotten there. She said she had been standing by the fireplace looking at the shelves and then she was outside. There was no memory of walking out. No memory of crossing the porch, crossing the clearing, crossing to the tree line. She had simply been in one place and then in another. Garrett said that sometimes happens. He said it was called dissociation. He said the woods at night could do that to people, the sensory deprivation, the repetitive sound of footsteps, it could create a mild trance-like state. He said it very calmly and it was a perfectly reasonable explanation, and Madison said she wanted to believe it, and could not quite get herself all the way there. They went back to camp. Chelsea was asleep in the tent. The fire had burned low. They did not talk much. Priya went straight to her tent and Garrett went in after her and zipped it closed and said nothing further to any of them. Madison lay awake in her tent for a long time that night. Derek fell asleep quickly, which she both resented and was grateful for. She lay on her back and she listened to the forest. It was quiet again. That same pressing, heavy quiet from the night before. And then, at some point in the small hours, she heard the sound again. Closer this time. Not the distant, ambiguous thing she had heard the first night. This was close enough that she could hear it clearly and understand that it was not an animal sound and not a human sound. It was rhythmic. Low. A kind of deep, slow, oscillating tone that seemed to come from multiple directions at once and from no direction at all. It lasted longer this time. Maybe 2 minutes. And during those 2 minutes she said she could not move. She was not paralyzed in the dramatic way. She was not incapacitated. She simply found that her body had no interest in moving. Like the decision had been made for her. When it stopped, the silence rushed back in and she could breathe normally. She did not sleep again that night. In the morning she told Derek everything. The sound. The not moving. She told him she wanted to leave. She said she was not being dramatic, she was not the kind of person who said things like this for effect. But she genuinely did not feel safe and she wanted to go home. Derek listened. He did not dismiss her. He was a good man, she said, and she wants to make that clear. He was a good man who genuinely listened and took her seriously. He said he would talk to the group. The conversation over breakfast was tense. Ryan did not want to leave. He was still buzzing from the night before, the cabin, the journal, all of it. He called it the greatest adventure of his life. Chelsea, who had been updated and was now looking at Ryan with the expression of someone deciding how much they liked someone, said she was fine either way. Priya said nothing. She had dark circles under her eyes and was eating very slowly and looking at the ground. Garrett said they should stay. He said it simply, without elaboration. He said it the way someone says it when they are used to being the one who decides things. And Madison watched Priya's face when he said it, and she saw something there. Not agreement. Not relief. Something more like resignation. Like a person who has stopped arguing about something they already lost. Madison said she was leaving. Derek said if Madison was leaving, he was leaving. Ryan said fine, they could leave if they wanted to. He and Chelsea and Garrett and Priya would stay another night. Chelsea looked at Ryan. Chelsea said actually, you know what, she thought they should probably all go. She said she had been reading about this area and there were some things she was not super comfortable with. She said it casually, but Madison caught it and loved her for it. Ryan argued. Garrett said nothing and watched everyone. Priya was quiet. And then Priya said, very softly, that she wanted to go. It was the first thing she had said all morning. Everyone looked at her. She said it again, looking at the ground. She said she wanted to go home. She said it with the voice of someone who had been wanting to say something for a long time and was only now finding the words. Garrett looked at her for a long moment. Madison said the look was not angry. It was evaluating. And then he said, "Fine." Fine, they would leave. He said it agreeably, pleasantly even, like it had been his idea. They packed up camp in a way that was faster than breaking camp usually is when you are not in a hurry, which is to say they were all in a hurry without wanting to admit they were in a hurry. Tents down, gear packed, fire doused and scattered. They were loaded and on the trail out before 10 in the morning. The hike out was quiet. Nobody talked much. The forest was beautiful in the morning light, same as it had been 2 days ago, but the beauty felt different to Madison. At a distance. Like looking at a painting through glass. They reached the cars. Loaded the gear. Hugged, the kind of stiff hugs people give when something has shifted but nobody wants to be the first to name it. Ryan and Chelsea drove away first. Garrett and Priya's car was parked next to Madison and Derek's, and as they were loading the last of their things, Madison went around the back of their car to grab a bag and she came around the front of Garrett's car and nearly ran into Priya, who was standing by the passenger door, not getting in, just standing there. Priya grabbed her arm. She grabbed it hard, with both hands, and she leaned close and she said, "Please don't look anything up about this place. Don't go back. Don't try to find out about the cabin." And then she said something that Madison has thought about every day since. She said, "He has been here before?" Madison started to ask what she meant. Garrett came around the car and Priya released her arm and stepped back and her face went completely neutral, like a light switched off, and she said it was so great to meet you and got in the car. Garrett looked at Madison for just a moment. Not threatening. Not angry. Just looking. And then he got in the car and they drove away. Madison and Derek drove home mostly in silence. She did not tell Derek what Priya had said. She does not know why. She said it felt like something she needed to hold alone for a little while. That night, in their apartment, she made tea and sat at the kitchen table and opened her laptop and told herself she was not going to do exactly what Priya had told her not to do. She typed in the coordinates Garrett had mentioned for the old service road. She found a topographic map that showed it clearly. She traced it. She found the clearing marked faintly, not labeled, but there. Visible once you knew to look. She searched for historical records of the area. Old land grants. Settler records. She found, after about an hour of searching through digitized county records, a reference to a man named Elias Croft who had claimed land in the Pisgah region in 1887. He was listed in a county ledger for 2 years and then stopped appearing in any records whatsoever. No death certificate. No departure record. No family record. Just a land claim and then nothing. Like a sentence that ends mid-word. She searched for the name Elias Croft and found, after another hour, a single newspaper clipping from a county paper dated 1902. Scanned and barely legible. It was a brief article, 4 or 5 sentences, about a party of hunters who had come across an abandoned cabin in the Pisgah Forest. The article noted that inside the cabin, they had found a journal of some personal writings left by the former occupant. The article did not describe the contents of the journal in any detail, noting only that the writings suggested the man had experienced a period of severe mental disturbance before his disappearance. The article noted the hunters had left the journal in the cabin as they found it, not wishing to disturb what might be the property of a man's estate. The cabin had been found in 1902. And in 2019, when Madison and her friends found it, the journal was still there. She closed the laptop. She called Priya's number. It rang twice and then went to voicemail. She said, "Hey, it is Madison from the camping trip. I just wanted to check in and see how you are doing and also maybe talk about what you said before you got in the car because I have been thinking about it." She kept her voice light. She left her number. Priya never called back. She texted. No response. She checked social media and found that Priya's accounts, which she had looked at briefly after they were first introduced, were gone. Instagram gone. Facebook gone. Like she had deleted them. She called Chelsea and asked if she had heard from Priya. Chelsea said no, she had texted her the day before and got nothing back. She said it was weird, but people were weird sometimes, you know? She said Ryan was still talking about the cabin, and she was thinking about banning the subject in their household. Madison said casually, "Hey, do you know Garrett's last name?" Chelsea said she only knew him as Garrett, she had met him through Priya. She said she assumed it was the same last name as Priya, but she had never gotten his last name directly. Madison asked if she knew Priya's last name. Chelsea said Priya Sharma. She said she thought Garrett might be Garrett Sharma, but she was not sure if they shared a name. Madison searched for Garrett Sharma. Nothing specific. A common enough combination of names. She searched for missing persons in Asheville. Nothing recent that fit. She let it sit for a week. She went to work. She ate dinner with Derek. She did the ordinary things. She almost convinced herself she was being ridiculous. And then, 8 days after the camping trip, Derek came home from work looking strange. He sat down at the kitchen table and he said, "Hey, you know that passage in the journal, the one I read and wouldn't tell you about?" She said yes. He said he had written it down after they got home. He had gone to the car and sat in the parking lot of the campsite before they left, and he had written it in his phone because he could not let go of it. He had not told her because he did not want her to feel worse than she already felt. But she had a right to know. He said he was sorry he had kept it from her. He read it from his phone. It went like this. There are 2 of them now. A man and a woman. The man has been here before, though not in this body. I cannot explain what I mean by that except to say that recognition has nothing to do with the physical form, and when you have been in a place long enough you learn to recognize a presence regardless of its shell. The woman does not know. Or she knows something is wrong, but she has not let herself understand what she knows. He brings them here. That is what he does. He finds the ones who are open and he brings them here, and here they stay. Or some part of them does, and he goes back and finds more. He has been doing this since before I came to this clearing. I think he has been doing it since there have been clearings to bring people to. The marks on the trees are not his. The marks are warnings left by the ones who came before me. I understand that now. I have added my own. Madison did not say anything for a long time after Derek finished reading. Then she asked him what he thought it meant. He said he did not know. He said he thought it was probably the writing of a man who had gone a little mad from isolation, and was probably not meant to be interpreted literally. He said that was the rational explanation. She asked him if he believed the rational explanation. He said he wanted to. She said that was not the same as yes. He said no. It was not. They sat with it for another week. Life kept going, the way life keeps going even when something has shifted inside it. And then one evening Madison was walking home from the coffee shop where she sometimes worked on freelance projects, and she turned a corner, and she saw Priya. She was standing on the sidewalk about half a block ahead. Standing still, which is unusual enough on a busy Asheville sidewalk to catch the eye. She was facing away, and Madison recognized her immediately, the specific way she stood, the color of her jacket. Madison called her name. Priya turned around. And for a moment, just a moment, her face was completely empty. Not neutral the way a stranger's face is neutral. Empty. Like a room with the furniture removed. Like the feature resolution of a person before the person loads. Then it shifted and she looked like Priya again, and she smiled and said, "Madison, oh my gosh, hi." Madison walked up to her. She said she had tried to call and text, she had been worried. Priya said, "Oh sorry, I know, things have been crazy." She had lost her old phone and gotten a new number. She seemed perfectly normal. She seemed warm and funny, the person Madison had liked immediately at their first meeting. She asked about Derek. She asked about the camping trip as if they had not been on it together. Madison said, "Priya, do you remember what you said to me in the parking lot before you left?" Priya looked at her. And there it was again. That fraction of a second. The empty frame. Then she said she did not know what Madison was talking about. She said she did not think she had said anything in the parking lot. She said they had all just hugged and said goodbye and left, right? Madison looked at her for a long moment. She was going to say more. She had planned to say more. But something stopped her. The same something that had made her not move in the dark of the tent when the sound was coming from the trees. She said it felt like a warning? Like something saying, "Not here. Not now. Not to this." She said goodbye to Priya. She walked home. She looked back once, from the corner, and Priya was still standing in the same spot on the sidewalk, watching her go, with no expression at all on her face. She never saw Priya again after that. She and Derek talked about going to the police. About reporting what? They had no crime. They had no missing person. Priya was apparently alive and apparently fine. They had an old journal in a cabin in the woods written by a man who had disappeared over a century ago. They had a sound in the night, and a feeling in the tent, and a woman standing at a tree line with no memory of walking there. They talked about going back to the cabin. They talked about it seriously, as if going back was a reasonable thing to consider doing. And then they talked themselves out of it, the way sensible people do. Because they were sensible people. Because they wanted to be sensible people. But Madison says she thinks about the cabin almost every day. She says she thinks about the journal, about Elias Croft who claimed land in 1887 and then stopped existing. She thinks about the marks on the trees, the sets of 3 cut low into the bark, and how she had not thought to look for them when they were there, and now she wonders if they were there, and she just did not see them. She thinks about Garrett and the way he moved through the forest at night without hesitation. She thinks about what the journal said. He has been doing it since before I came to this clearing. I think he has been doing it since there have been clearings to bring people to. And she thinks about the last thing Priya ever said to her that she meant. Not the version on the Asheville sidewalk with the empty eyes. The version in the parking lot by the cars, gripping her arm with both hands, leaning close. He has been here before. And then one more thing. One more thing that Madison mentioned almost as an aside near the end of her account to us, in a way that suggested she had been deciding whether to include it, and had decided at the last moment that she should. She said that about 3 months after the camping trip, she was helping her mother clear out some old boxes from the family attic. Books and old photos and the kind of accumulated miscellany of a long life. And in one of the boxes, in a folder of old local newspaper clippings that her grandmother had collected for reasons that were now impossible to know, she found a photograph. A grainy, black and white photograph, dated on the back 1974. It showed a group of people, maybe 8 or 9, standing outside what appeared to be a ranger station or park office. Park visitors, the caption suggested, who had come to report an unusual finding in the forest. And in the back of the group, slightly out of focus, but clearly enough visible, was a man who looked exactly like Garrett. Madison says she does not know what any of it means. She says she is not a person who believes in the supernatural. She was not raised that way, and she has not been given reason to reconsider that position by anything that has happened to her before or since this event. But she says she knows what she saw, and she knows what she heard, and she knows what she read, and she knows what that photograph showed. And she says she knows that the cabin is still out there, in that clearing that is not on any map, with the journal still on the table and the marks still on the trees, waiting the way it has always been waiting. Patient in the way that only very old things learn to be patient. She says she drives a different route now to avoid passing the road that leads to the trailhead parking lot. She says she has not been camping since. She says Derek is fine and they are happy and life is good, and she is grateful for all of it. But she says when the weather turns in October, when the air gets that particular crispness and the leaves go orange and gold, she feels it. She feels it in the body's old animal way, beneath thought and reason, the thing that remembers even when the mind has decided to forget. She says she hopes that writing it down, sending it to us, will do something. Take some of the weight. Put it somewhere outside herself. Madison, if you are listening, we hope it helped. We hope you and Derek have a beautiful and very uneventful autumn. We genuinely, truly hope that. And now, everyone listening, let me just sit with this one for a moment. Because I have been doing this for a while now. I have heard a lot of stories. I have read a lot of accounts. And this one got to me in a particular way that I want to be honest about. It is the cabin that stays with me. Not the sounds in the night, not the moving book, not even Garrett, though Garrett certainly stays with you. It is the cabin itself. The fact that it was sound, maintained, refusing to decay. The fact that the journal was still there after more than a century. The fact that someone, or something, keeps placing it on the table. Open. Waiting to be read. And I keep coming back to that line in the journal. What the man wrote. He brings them here. And here they stay, or some part of them does. Or some part of them does. I am not going to tell you what to think about this story. You are all smart people and you have your own frameworks and your own ways of making sense of the world, and I respect that completely. All I will say is that the next time you are planning a trip into the woods and someone in your group mentions that they found something on an old map that is not on any of the current maps, and suggests maybe you should go check it out, and does not seem surprised when the book has moved, and stands 15 feet from the porch when everyone else goes in, you should trust your body before you trust your reasoning. Because your body has been keeping you alive for a very long time. It knows things your reasoning does not. Stay safe out there, everyone. Keep your fire lit. Keep your people close. And for the love of everything, put the journal back where you found it. And do not go back at night. If you made it to the end of this story, I want to sincerely thank you for being here and for spending part of your evening, or your night, or your early morning with us here at Bella Dark Tales. It genuinely means the world. If this story found you, if it got under your skin the way it got under mine, please do us a favor and hit that like button and share this with someone who loves a good scare. Because every share is how stories like Madison's find the people who need to hear them. And if you have not subscribed yet, please do. We are here every week with new stories from real people who have experienced things they cannot explain, and we would love to have you in our community. Most importantly, we want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell us what you think about tonight's story. What got to you? Was it the cabin? Was it Garrett? Was it the photograph from 1974? Tell us. We read every single comment, and we love hearing your thoughts more than you know. And if you have a story of your own, something that happened to you or someone close to you, something you have been carrying and need to put somewhere, please send it to us. Our email is belladarktales@gmail.com. Write it out. Send it in. You might just find your story told here next week, helping someone else feel a little less alone in whatever they have been through. This has been Bella Dark Tales. Sleep well tonight, everyone. If you can,